Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Punch Up Pod with Lila and Pat. Happy Sunday night. Pat, my friend, how are you this evening?
Sunday fun day. I am so happy to be here and not working, not reading the news on Twitter. I'm with my lovely co-host and a special guest tonight, which is incredible. Hell has frozen over. Never thought this day would come, but I appreciate it so much.
It's a very exciting closing of the circle coming together. I am thrilled. I don't want to get too controversial right off the bat. I will just put it out there that my Dodgers are playing against my Mets, and I know that that's probably got a lot of people. I am a New Yorker, transplanted in LA, so I am extending love to everybody, but you all know who I'm really rooting for.
And I couldn't care less, so forget about baseball. This is more important right here, guys.
This is very important. Yeah, we've got a lot to discuss, and we're thrilled about it. So let's just quickly, as we always do, shout out and many thanks to our wonderful members, our pup heroes and sheroes. We are so grateful for all of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Cheers to all of you with my new red wine.
Cheers, cheers. Chairman Daou will join us in just a moment.
Yep. Should I let you push the buttons, or do you want me to push it?
Go for it.
All right, here we go. Mr. Peter Daou, welcome to the show. We are so thrilled to have you here.
I am so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And it really is a closing of the loop here, and it's a good feeling. And yep, Pat, I never thought we would end up here, but I'm glad we did.
Well, it's interesting. I just want to say, I never started. For the background on this, I ran a parody account about Peter Daou at one point, and ended up writing a book in the parody name. But I never did it to get laughs or for the lols or to mock you personally at all. It just, as a head messaging person within the Democratic Party, you were an easy target somewhat because you were out there doing that front forward messaging. And I just want to say, like, the moment I knew your transition was real and your evolution was authentic, and even before then, I wanted to give you space, so I stopped the account, and I'm glad we did. And you've proven me right completely, and I appreciate you for that.
Thank you so much. And I think I've told you privately that I probably would have done the same thing. you were the most effective of my detractors at the time, and you were right to do it. And I really have no hard feelings at all. I learned a lot. I mean, my evolution and my transition into being outside of the party, leaving the Democratic Party and being anti-establishment, was really because I listened to people like you and many others who were critical of me. Because you can either, double down and lash out at your critics, or you can listen to what they're saying and maybe they're right. And you guys turned out to be right. So yeah, and I'm glad we're here, but it was a process. And maybe later on we'll talk a little bit more about that process.
We should. And so just because not everybody is as online as some of us are, I just want to present you to everybody, a political strategist for decades now. You've headed up quite a few presidential campaigns. Initially for the Democratic Party, you were working with Hillary Clinton. And then was there somebody before Hillary?
John Kerry. I worked on Kerry's 2004 campaign. Yep.
Okay. And because we want you to sort of like elaborate on all of this, you were a very outspoken anti-third party person while you were working with Democrats, and you had an awakening, a transition at some point, and we would love to hear about that, especially because we're seeing it happen again now towards mostly Jill Stein, because her campaign is the one that's gathering the most traction. But it's a lot of the same tactics, and you woke up and have changed, and you did it in a really public, graceful way. You were so gracious, and even just the way you're, talking to Pat, which we're both, really thankful for. But I think we're all feeling frustrated with those sort of normie Dem voters in our lives who are swayed by the tactics that are being used. And my feeling is that it's dangerous if we support Kamala at this point, after the complete disregard that Democrats are showing for every single issue that their base and most of the country wants, including, but the most important, a genocide. So with that, we just kind of wanted to give the floor to you a little bit and tell us about your journey to this point.
Yeah, let me do that, because I hope that others can take the same journey. I mean, if I could go back earlier, I was, and just give you some of the real background, because it will help you understand how I got here. I was born and raised in Beirut, Lebanon. My mom is Jewish American, she's a Jewish New Yorker. So I was born, I'm a natural born citizen. I was born American. So I'm not, but I do identify very much with the Lebanese people. My dad was Christian Lebanese. He and my mom met when he was getting his PhD at Columbia. She was going up there to college as well. And they went back to the Middle East, to Beirut, when it was the Paris of the Middle East. This is 1950s. A beautiful place, very cosmopolitan place. But I was born there, and when I was 10, the Lebanese Civil War started. And from that point on, my life was just hell. What you're seeing in Beirut right now was what I lived through. And it's funny, you see a piano behind me. I was a musician for many years, and I'll tell you about that. But the first piano I learned on, we used as a barricade. So during the day, when there was a lull in the fighting, I would do my classical scales and my jazz and whatever. And then at night, we would roll the piano. It was an upright piano in front of either windows or the door to prevent rockets or bullets from coming in. And so I lived the hell that you're seeing, and I know what the kids there are going through, and my heart just breaks. And I still suffer from PTSD from what I lived through. Literally every year of my life after 10 was war and violence. But then I came to the U.S. and I got into the music business for years. I had a very long, successful career. I was, very honored to work with some amazing artists. But in 2000, when George Bush was elected, whatever you want to say, I got into politics. Now, if you can just give me a couple of minutes, because this will go to a lot of what you and I, Pat, were going back and forth about in 2016 and before that. How did I get into the Democratic Party, and how can people get out of it? So growing up in Lebanon, I didn't study American history. I didn't study political science. In college, I studied philosophy. I was really more interested in philosophical, spiritual stuff, and music. I was a musician. I was a producer. I was not political. And so when I got into politics in 2000, I knew almost nothing about politics. So where did I get my information from? The CNNs, the MSNBCs, the New York Times, Washington Post. And that propaganda, which is now propaganda, from my perspective now, I understand that it's propaganda. But at the time I didn't. I thought that is correct information. And I was told that you join the blue team or the red team. Yep. You're on one side or the other. Yeah. And I leaned towards, because I was doing environmental activism and stuff like that, I leaned towards the blue team, because the blue team was maybe more pro-environment, also on reproductive health and issues like that. So when you join the blue team, your mindset is the blue team is the morally right team. Yeah. Now, there may be differences in different politicians, but generally, so when I worked for Hillary Clinton or John Kerry, well, they're the good guys. This is the good side. And the red side is the bad team. And I fully imbibed that mindset. Why? Because I just didn't have more information. That's how I perceive politics, and that's how the vast majority of Americans perceive politics. They're told you're on one of the two teams. Third parties are spoilers. Don't get involved with that. And so once I got out of it, of course, I saw all of this. As I got further up into the system, I was very aggressive with online politics. I loved the idea of blogs and internet long before social media, right? When the first blogs were starting, the Daily Kosas, places like that, Talking Points Memo. I made myself an expert in that stuff, and I quickly became like the sort of go-to guy for digital politics very early on. So the Kerry campaign hired me. I worked in the war room all the way from the primary through the general election, all the way to the very last day. And then everybody started calling, And I worked with a lot of organizations. Like, I was a progressive guy, so I worked with, Planned Parenthood, Amnesty International, the United Nations Foundation. A lot of my work wasn't politicians; it was progressive or democratic-leaning organizations that were doing work, around the world. UN Foundation was a long-time client that I worked with. And then Hillary Clinton called me in 2006, and she was still a senator at the time, and I became her digital strategist. In 2008. I ran her internet department for her campaign. In 2004, I remember being at the Democratic convention and going backstage talking about the internet with this young senator. He made a little speech. Turns out it was Barack Obama. We had this long conversation about how the internet's going to influence politics. Sure enough, 4 years later, he beat Hillary Clinton, got the nomination. But so for all those years, and then up until 2016, I was a vote blue no matter who. I was exactly the person who was attacking Jill Stein. Third parties are spoilers. You've got to vote for the blue party because the red party is going to destroy everything, or the red team is going to destroy everything. That was my mindset. It was the mindset of all my friends, everybody I worked with, and I truly believed it. So Pat, when I went after Bernie, it was more like, okay, he's blue team and Hillary's blue team, but she'd be the first woman president. That was how rudimentary my understanding of politics. I didn't have any class analysis. I didn't really know much about socialism, communism, capitalism. I really was just a music producer who decided to get into activism and somehow got sucked into the Democratic establishment. I was always an outsider because I'm just sort of this Lebanese musician, right? I was never the Yale-trained political scientist, which is what most of those people around me were.
Right.
But I was good at what I did with digital politics. And as you both know, I was very aggressive in my loyalty and sort of my advocacy for whoever I was defending. And at the time it was, okay, first woman president. I have kids and I want them to see me be part of that. Now, of course, looking back, obviously I see, what Hillary Clinton represented in terms of her policies. I wasn't looking at policy at the time, really.
Right.
It was more like the blue team. Blue team has to beat the red team, right? So, but what happened was, around 2016, I wasn't working for her campaign, but I was supporting her from outside. And I worked with different people around in the orbit of the campaign. And I just got lost in the cult of personality. Mm-hmm. Hillary had become a friend. I'd been to her house, met her mother. I worked with Bill Clinton. I'd become part of the inner orbit of the Clintons. And for me, it was like, oh, 2016, she's running again. Let's get that first woman in the White House. And I lost sight because, I was a fan of Paul Wellstone. I was a fan of much more progressive politicians in 2002, 2003. I was a big anti-war activist. I marched in just about every march against the Iraq War. I did, sit-ins and die-ins on Fifth Avenue, and every march on the East Coast, up and down, I was there with my anti-war poster. So, for me, and I did publicly speak out against Hillary's vote on the Iraq War. I mean, I had breaks with the party.
Right.
But I advocated so strongly for her, I lost sight of, I think it became about a person who I considered a friend and not about the entire political system. I wasn't educated enough. Right. Then along comes Pat and other people, many others, but he was sort of at the forefront. I was reading everything he was saying, like hurling all this invective at me, like, what are you doing? You're awful. And you're stopping Bernie's movement. And what are you doing, Peter? And of course, I lashed out. Like, we'd have these wars. Maybe later you'll show some of the tweets and some of that stuff, right? It was war because I'm loyal to the blue team. But around 2017, my wife Leela and Leela was with me through all of this stuff. We've been together for 13, 14 years now. I just started reading what people like Pat and others were saying, and I thought, wait a minute. They may be right. And for me to keep doubling down may not be the best approach here. Maybe I lean into the criticism, try to absorb it. So I started moving slowly. I started supporting Bernie in 2019, 2020, right?
Peter, can I just stop you for a second? Sure. What made you listen to it? Like, was there an event, a moment? Was there something where somebody had pushed too far on like the blue team? Like, what made you actually decide? Yeah.
The full break really was with Joe Biden. Joe Biden sort of was that figurehead where the cognitive dissonance for me became too much to bear. Trump, I opposed Trump. I mean, I had a feature article in the New York Times about all these anti-Trump memes I was doing. Nobody posted, like when I get people online saying, oh, now you support Trump, you're effectively, no private citizen was more anti-Trump than I could have been at the time. Right. I was, I did videos with 10, 15 million views that were anti-Trump videos during his campaign, right? Because I was supporting Hillary, obviously, against Trump. So, but 2017, 18, as we started moving toward the 2020 campaign, I was already starting to shift toward Bernie, but then Joe Biden to me is an egregious figure in politics, always has been. Yeah. And this sort of avuncular reputation he has as this kind, sweet uncle is just beyond absurd. I mean, this is a guy who, I was looking at Trump and the Me Too movement, and Joe Biden has 8 women who have come forward, 8. People focus on Tara Reid, but there were 8 women who came forward and accused him of inappropriate touching or harassment or verbal abuse or whatever you want to call it. Inappropriate
some
conduct.
Democrats.
What's that?
Some Democratic politicians.
Exactly. And Kamala Harris herself during the campaign, during the primary, said we should believe those women. So here you have this whole believe women movement, and suddenly everything and all these videos of him sort of like groping young girls, and they're all uncomfortable. And I thought, wait a minute, the Me Too movement is supposed to be this sort of democratic thing where Democrats care more about women's rights. And I'm thinking, how are you letting this slide? And then one thing after the other, and then during his presidency, but those types of things were just too much for me at that point. And I actually, in 2020, I formally quit the party and registered as an unaffiliated, but as an independent. And that's when I started working with Howie Hawkins and the Green Party, supporting them. And I moved fully into independent/voting Green. Now, of course, it was a much longer evolution, but I don't want to take up the whole show talking about that. But this is the process that I see in all the liberals who are supporting Kamala Harris and Biden right now. They are absolutely incapable, or unwilling to see how bad Biden has been. And now Kamala doesn't want any daylight with Joe Biden. She's saying this, I'm just a continuation. We agree on everything. We're going to continue his policies. Now, I want to talk to how that affects Gaza and other places in Lebanon and all that. But I'll stop here. But that's the evolution. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about the depth of it later and the details of it later.
So I have another question, and Pat, I'm sure you have a million things to say. There are a lot of people, I think, who absolutely get this sort of sense of moral rectitude, voting blue, right? They're the better team for all the different reasons. At least they, pay their respects towards climate change as they brag about, all the oil drilling. And so there are people who are definitely team blue no matter what. Then there's a group, and this is the group that I have a harder time with on some level because they're so close, but they're so terrified. Like, actually, Hillary Clinton Pied Pipering Trump into, the atmosphere has been the greatest gift to Democrats because people are terrified of him. And so even if they say, yes, the genocide is wrong, and Joe Biden has lost his, marbles and whatever, all that stuff, they might agree. And yet in the end, when it comes down to it, especially if they are in a swing state or think it's at all in contention, they are just too frightened.
Yeah, I'll address that. I don't know, Pat, did you have a question as well? But I have a very specific point to that. But go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to go back to the period where you're working within the party. As a progressive leftist and in the role that I played, a lot of what you did felt like propaganda. And I'm sure, as you're explaining, it didn't, in your mind, feel that way necessarily because it's so the ends justify the means, or this is so black and white, it's irrelevant. But did you ever feel like during that time, some of the projects like the Hillary Men were going too far to exaggerate these issues? And did you feel at that time that doing so was sort of undercutting the movements that Bernie was backing?
Look, here's the thing.
Supported?
Yeah, and I don't want to miss your question too, Lila, because your question, the reason I just paused a little on that one, because that sort of segues into other stuff.
Chronological, right?
Yeah, but your question in terms of the vote no matter who and the different levels of that, the fear of Trump, is a critical point. So I'm not going to forget that. But going back to that point, Pat, I never felt, look, I consider, everybody considers themselves a good person, but I considered myself an honest actor at the time. I was super sort of intense about my advocacy. And I think, I still hear to this day, you're an operative and you're nefarious and you're a op and all this type of stuff. But really at the time was like, I'm going to help elect the first woman president. I'm going to make history. Go. That was it. I wasn't really thinking at the time of the damage I was doing. But in hindsight, I did damage because I never used the term Bernie bro because I didn't like that term. It was very gendered. I didn't like what it represented. But of course, I pushed the same arguments, and what I did was I sort of denigrated the Bernie movement, which would have been my movement had I not been so sort of almost blinded by what I was trying to do. So the answer to your question is I didn't intentionally hurt anyone. I didn't intentionally spread propaganda, but I effectively did. And so my sort of mea culpa and my apologies over the past, 8 years now, I've been sort of apologizing. And I'm not doing it for any reason other than I think I owe an apology, right? Now, I will say one thing, and I don't know if you guys may dispute it. My core argument was that Bernie was just a creature of the establishment. Sadly, to me, unfortunately, I was sort of proven correct over the past year. And what I was pointing out is his early NRA support and a lot of things that he did, because I had been inside the system and I knew him and the whole system a lot better than some others. I was just saying, look, he's blue team and Hillary's blue team. I want to like the first one president. But Pat, you're right. I mean, there was some stuff that Bernie was doing that was so important, and I do feel bad that I tried to pour cold water on it. In hindsight, I would not have done it. And even now, again, I'll say I'm sorry that I did it. And to everybody I argue and everybody I talk to use sexist arguments, I was just wrong. I was dead wrong. There are no excuses for it other than I just didn't have adequate information. But go ahead, and then I want to answer Lila's question.
Well, I was just thinking of like the Planned Parenthood thing, like, that Bernie was attacking Planned Parenthood, for example, when he was just attacking the leadership directly, not the organization. Or like at some point, did you know, well, this is just a zinger we're going to use against Bernie, and it's not necessarily authentic, but it's to exploit something we're strategically pushing that is bigger, that isn't as big as we're going to make it for the campaign. Like,
look, that's how it works. When you do communications, you try to highlight things. I certainly would never take something out of context. I always try to make sure the context was there. Did I paint stuff in the worst possible light against an opponent? Yes. That's how you do it. I mean, that's how you do what I do. And I, wouldn't have been working at the levels I worked in if I wasn't good at what I did. So if somebody makes a gaffe, you highlight the hell out of it. Right. You bring it to the front. You push it on as many platforms as you can. And again, I do regret it, but look, I've been very transparent, as you all know. I mean, many people have either not made this transition or have made it, but quietly. But I've been very public about my apologies. But really, at no time did I think that I was purposely trying to twist or contort information or spread propaganda. I truly believed that Bernie was more an establishment guy than people knew. Right. And those who sort of believed in his movement were going to be disappointed. And so that, was he, some of the things he was pushing were much better than Hillary, of course, at the time. Some of the issues. And I was very excited. Look, income inequality is a perfect example. For years before that had been a pet issue for me. The idea of billionaires, the idea of people having so much money, people having nothing. So for me, inequality was something Bernie brought up that nobody had brought up before, really, in campaigns with the intensity that he brought it up. And I was thrilled about it. I think I even wrote about it early before the campaign turned contentious. But the answer to your question is, I screwed up, but at no point was I thinking I'm purposely trying to contort information. It was like he made a mistake. Well, I'm gonna highlight it.
So just in the same vein, and this is not against you, but were you aware of the bias from the media against Bernie's campaign, and was there active cooperation that you were aware of with Hillary's campaign to, do the propaganda that you were being paid to do, or I don't want to use
whatever advocacy, propaganda, whatever it is.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, whatever you want to call it's fine.
Like, how aware were the insiders that they got this thing kind of cooked against Bernie with the media?
Very aware. I wasn't working the media, so that wasn't my role. My role is to work with the online community. Look, I initially, I got my first job with John Kerry because I was an anti-war activist, and Kerry said, we need somebody to connect with that community. That's the irony of the whole thing, is how sort of far I veered off my initial path. Like, I was the progressive Netroots guy. Right? That's what I was. And that's why Hillary hired me. That's why, if you look back at the New York Times when Hillary hired me, it's like Hillary Clinton hires blogger to connect with the progressive community. That was my role. So the fact that I ended up turning and going against Bernie was so contrary to what I had been doing for the previous years. So again, that cognitive dissonance in myself, that's back to your question, Lila. That's when I started recognizing, Peter, you're going against your own stated values by doing this. Right. And if you keep doing it, you've become just the establishment that you're criticizing. You've become no better than those who are doing what, Pat, you're suggesting, which is just, you have no principles, you're just pushing a position. That's what made me break. I had reached that point where I was an anti-war musician. I was not a political guy. I was basically a refugee from Lebanon, from a war, who had survived a war. And now I'm finding myself at the top of the establishment game, and I'm now doing all this stuff, and I'm attacking Bernie Sanders and his movement, which would have been my movement just a few years before. So that was within myself. The dissonance within myself was what made me change. But I get what you're saying, Pat. But to answer your question, absolutely, there were mainstream journalists, and this is something that I haven't talked about before, that were in the war room of these campaigns. All the campaigns, the big campaigns I worked on, the top reporters would walk in and out of the war room all day long. And I'm talking about top, TV personalities, major Washington Post, New York Times. The intimate connection between the sort of party leaders and the press is bad. So the answer to the question is yes, I wasn't involved because I just wasn't doing the media side of it.
Right.
But I saw what was going on.
Yeah. WikiLeaks, I think, really opened up a lot of people's eyes who thought it was a fair playing field at one point. Who thought, oh, that's just democracy. More people just have to get out and vote. That's all that has to happen because we have a democracy. Yeah. And I think that also was really elucidating for many of us.
Look, they screwed Bernie over in 2020. That was one of the reasons also that I quit the party. I mean, literally, Obama just made a bunch of phone calls. It got everybody out of the race. I mean, I was a big Bernie supporter. The campaign had asked me to be a surrogate at the time, and I was all in on Bernie in 2020, and he was winning. Oh. I've been doing this a long time. The way Pete Buttigieg dropped out made absolutely no sense. Nobody in his position, almost winning the first, or perhaps winning, the first caucus or primary, just drops out a few weeks later. It doesn't happen unless he had been promised something or somebody, and those calls happen. And I've publicly spoken about this. Barack Obama effectively, the word rigged is overused. He made a bunch of phone calls and candidate to Joe Biden and pushed Bernie out for the second time. And that was the point at which it was like, okay, I don't want to be a part of this.
You got round two of that with phone calls to get Kamala in as well. Yeah. But not from Obama necessarily, but there's definitely some forces at work where she earned the vote overnight. Well,
this is an election doesn't get more rigged than this one, than the Democratic. But this whole word, the defenders of democracy. I worked for Marianne Williamson. Now, a lot of people criticize me, why you're working with Democrats if you're an independent. I thought Marianne would move independent. And I've said this publicly. I talked to her years before about it. I thought I'd join her campaign. She'd declare an independent run and we'd go, right? Yeah. But when Marianne was running as a Democrat and I was managing her campaign last year, the shenanigans the Democratic Party was pulling, threatening colleges that she wanted to appear at, saying that we'd cut your funding for the college Dems if you have her show up there. All sorts of dirty tricks. And, everything that the Democratic Party does to win elections is classic rigging, vote shaming, lawfare, basically attacking the Green Party. They are anti-democracy. The way this, Joe Biden wanted it. He wanted to be president for life, and he ran, contrary to every single poll that showed him losing to Trump. Okay, eventually, big donors recognized it. Okay, this is going to be a disaster. But the fact is, and then they handed it to Kamala Harris.
After shutting down a primary.
Exactly, there was just nothing democratic. No. Exactly. And these are just facts. Look, my former Democratic friends, many of them just hate me with the fire of 1,000 suns, right? Because it's like, I'm the traitor, I'm the defector, right? I turned on that system. I see a lot of what happened to Peter Daou. Did he go crazy? What happened? And to me, I just opened my eyes. But to them, I'm a traitor to the cause now. Yeah. So it is what it is. But Lila, can I get to your question, or Pat? You got another point?
Oh, Lila, please.
Okay. So Lila, you were asking. I want to segue into Gaza, if it's okay, or Gaza in the American pronunciation. I'll call it Gaza.
You should pronounce it the way you feel comfortable pronouncing it. We know both pronunciations. Yes.
Okay, no problem. So the fundamental question at stake here, for everybody who says Trump is an existential threat, all right, there are two components to that are crucially important in doing the ethical analysis, the moral analysis of what is the right vote, what is the right thing to do. We're getting very close to the election. I believe that a vote for Kamala Harris is a morally wrong vote. It is an immoral vote. And let me tell you why. I also believe, contrary to what all these Democrats who are so terrified of Trump are saying, it will be worse for this planet long term to reward Biden and Harris for what they have done in Palestine and in Lebanon, my country of birth. To reward them for that will empower future dictators and tyrants and mass killers and any country that wants to flout and ignore the rule of law. The harm that will be done if the American people reward Kamala Harris with a vote is far more than what Trump can do. Trump was already president. We know what he did in those 4 years. Trump is heinous to me. Okay, his immigration policy is xenophobic, it's bigoted, it's horrifying. They tore families apart. He and Stephen Miller. I oppose Trump and everything he stands for. I've fought the GOP for 25 years. I've written books about it. I've been in the media about it. I've earned my sort of credentials, my anti-GOP credentials. So when people say you're helping Trump, to me, it just slides right off, right? I have opposed the GOP from the very, however, Trump, look at the doomsday clock, which is put together by a bunch of scientists, right? It is the closest to midnight it has ever been. That's not me talking. This is a bunch of scientists. Than it's ever been under Biden. It was 2 minutes to midnight under Trump. It's 90 seconds to midnight under Biden. Why? Because Biden and the neocons around him, and I hate to say this, I said this to you earlier, Pat, I know all these people. Somebody like Jake Sullivan, I used to play ping pong with at the Hillary campaign. These are people I worked with at the top levels of the US government. I know who they are. I know their character, and I worked with them. I was in that system for a while, right? For a long time. So what Biden has done and what Harris has done is so far worse than what Trump measurably, factually, this is not conjecture, factually speaking, Biden and Harris, because she's been the VP, but also she's saying she supports what he's done, right? She stands by the record. Biden and Harris have brought the world to the brink of World War III, okay? I have criticized Putin for his criminal invasion of Ukraine. It was a criminal invasion. It was imperialist. As an independent leftist, we criticize imperialism anywhere. However, he was provoked by Biden and the team, the neocons around him. Every single step, Biden and his team escalated against Putin rather than try to be peacemakers. It is a proxy war against Russia. It's the expansion of NATO. So yes, you can criticize what Putin has done in Ukraine, and you can bemoan the loss of civilians, which I do all the time. Children have suffered there. I know what that's like because I lived through it. However, Biden wanted that war and still wants that war. He was sending depleted uranium. He was sending cluster bombs. I know, having grown up in Lebanon, what cluster bombs do. What cluster bombs do is 20 years later, I know kids who were blown to pieces because they picked it up. Those are the most heinous weapons known to man, cluster bombs. And Biden sent them to Ukraine. All right. So Ukraine, Afghanistan, and we'll talk about, Palestine and all that, because I want to really get to that. At every step of the way, Biden has made war around the world. Okay. He has made the world, he and Harris, a much more dangerous place, more dangerous than Trump made it. And let me, Pat, go to one of your issues that I really respect you for talking about, and that's COVID. A lot of people, hundreds of thousands of people died under Trump. Yes. And hundreds of thousands more died under Biden because Biden completely ignored it. Yeah. Early in his presidency, he said it's gone. It's been, COVID is finished. We conquered it. Remember, he declared Independence Day from COVID. So hundreds of thousands more people died of COVID. That's sort of the last resort of these Democrats coming. Right. Well, under COVID, a lot of people died. So at every possible way that you measure death and suffering, Biden's presidency has been worse than Trump's. And it's hard for me to say this sometimes, having been a longtime Democrat who opposes the GOP, but I have to look at facts. I have to get rid of the propaganda and look at the facts. The facts are. Now, let's talk about Gaza. Let's talk about Palestinians. And give me just 2 minutes because I want to express my passion a little bit here. Every murdered child, every child shredded to pieces, every child under rubble. You vote for Kamala Harris, you say, yes, that's my stamp of approval for that. Every doctor, every aid worker, every journalist slaughtered. Yes, a vote for Kamala Harris is a stamp of approval on those actions. Every bomb dropped, every civilian killed, every mother crying over their child that's torn to bits, picking them up in bags. Every orphan wandering the streets, not having any parents, families wiped out. A teenage journalist, Israel said, we're going to kill you. A week later, bombed his home. Stamp of approval. If you vote for Harris, you are putting your personal stamp of approval on those acts. You are telling the world it's okay. It's good. We support it because Biden and Harris sent the bombs to do it. They sent the intelligence to do it, the resources to do it, the justifications to do it. At every single level, Biden and Harris have not only enabled, they're not just complicit, they have essentially led this because without their bombs, Netanyahu and Israel could not be doing what they're doing. So if you want to put your sacred vote, that ability you have to express your political sort of power, if you want to put your stamp of approval And you can call it ethnic cleansing or genocide. You don't even have to use the word genocide. Look at those babies. Look at the suffering. Look at those children. Doctors from Canada and the US put out a report in the past couple of weeks that they were sniping children in the head and the chest. They are purposely murdering children. A vote for Kamala Harris is a vote in support of that, and will tell every future tyrant that we accept that. What can Trump do if he gets in? Okay, Trump gets in, and Lila, back to your point. Yes, it is scary, the thought of Trump and Miller and their ilk running the country. That scares me because their positions are so extreme. They are so anti-immigrant. They are so xenophobic, right? And all sorts of issues like reproductive health. You know, my wife Leila almost died of an ectopic pregnancy. Under a Republican, she probably would have died. So these issues do matter. You can't just say, oh, you know, Democrats bad, Republicans good, or Republicans good, Democrats bad. You really have to look from the outside. And from the outside, they are both awful. But it is more dangerous to reward a genocide than it is to deal with another 4 years of Trump. We will oppose Trump. We will oppose all the bad things he does. But if we put our stand, justice, let me put it this way, the just outcome for those dead Palestinian children, the hundreds of thousands of dead Palestinians, the ones that are being starved, justice for them, it pains me to say this, is Kamala Harris losing. Even if that means 4 years of dealing with Trump, marching against him, protesting him. And I feel this very deeply. It's taken time to reach this conclusion. And I don't want Trump to win. I am not saying I want Trump to win. I want Jill Stein to win. Or if you don't like Jill Stein, another third-party candidate, a write-in candidate, a libertarian candidate. I forcefully and vehemently and vigorously encourage you not to support the duopoly. I would never tell people to vote Trump. But I'm saying in the eventuality, like as you're saying, people say, well, if you don't vote for Harris, you vote for whatever, you're going to get Trump. So I'm saying that vote against the duopoly. Vote against this horror, this atrocity. These are some of the worst atrocities against children in human history. In human history. Never for a full year. I shouldn't say never because we have the Holocaust. And look, I come from, on my mother's side, a Jewish background. The Holocaust means something very deep to me. But there are many of my Jewish brothers and sisters, and I identify as Catholic. I was baptized Catholic, and I am a follower of Jesus. But, you know, my mother's family is Jewish. And so the Holocaust is not something we take lightly or speak about lightly. And anti-Semitism is not something we speak about lightly or take lightly. It's very important. So I never want to speak about these things where I'm taking one side or the other, you know. But this is one of the great atrocities of human history. I'll stop there, but you know, you can see how passionate I feel about it. And now I'm watching Lebanon get bombed, and I don't think people realize how bad it is. They've already killed more people than died on October 7th, 2023 in Israel.
Yes, they're in the 2,500s, and they just lobbed chemical weapons at the United Nations peacekeepers in Gaza yesterday. A baby born on the same day it was born was shot in the head, sniped. Like, yeah. I mean, it's just, I agree with you. I think that, I mean, first of all, despise Trump, as we all do. And like from the 80s, I was in New York. We all knew who he was when Hillary and Bill were like golfing with him and inviting them to weddings. Like, so, you know, some of us would have crossed the street to get away from him while they were still cavorting with him. Of course, he's obscene, disgusting, can't stand him. But yes, a vote to sanction this is more dangerous for all the reasons you just said. And the other aspect is that when Trump is in power, all of a sudden, you know, the pussy hat wearing brigade come out to march for Me Too, which disappeared. The, you know, Black Lives Matter, the anti-war protests, the, you know, COVID, the death ticker, which disappeared, even though now Joe Biden's killed twice as many people, even with the vaccine. So there are environmental issues. I mean, there was a tweet or a post, we call it now, from Biden a few weeks ago showing a chart where he had drilled twice as much oil as Trump. I mean, the doomsday clock's about the two great existential threats, which is World War III, which Biden has brought us much closer to, and the climate emergency, which Biden is also, and Democrats are completely ignoring, drilling, oil. The immigration policy right now of Democrats is hardcore right-wing anti-immigrant policy. They have adopted Stephen Miller's strategy. So, you know, I look at fellow Democrats or former fellow Democrats. I'm no longer, when I say fellow, like former friends who are Democrats,
who are angry at me for my positions. And when I look at other people who had what I used to have before, like don't vote third party and all that, you've got to look at the facts. Biden has just been worse than Trump. It is so sort of amazing to say that. How can you outdo Trump and be worse? But damn, they have been worse. Biden and Harris have been worse than Trump. So, I mean,
but not only, to me, not only are they worse, they're movement killers, because we would have these Democratic people on our side if Democrats weren't pretending to represent them. It's
precisely.
So if Trump gets elected, the anti-war movement is back. You don't have to be silent because it's a Democrat doing it right now. COVID, we'll start paying attention to COVID again because it's under Trump. All these issues.
That's a great point, Pat. That's a really good point. That people do argue, and I think it's a fair argument, that if Trump were doing the same things Biden did, you'd have these liberals marching in the streets against him. So arguably, having Trump do the same, people say, well, Trump will be much worse because he's Netanyahu's best friend. There's nothing worse that can be done. Biden and Harris had, on Palestine, I'm saying nothing right now close. Specifically, they have given absolute total carte blanche, total free rein to Israel to kill, slaughter, maim, commit atrocities, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, barbaric acts, all with the bombs, the money, the weapons from Biden and Harris. So this idea that somehow, Netanyahu really wants Trump because Trump would be worse, it's a hypothetical. It is an absolute hypothetical. Elections are often, and you both know this, you follow politics pretty closely, right? Elections are either forward-looking, proactive, or they're retroactive. They're referendums on the incumbent. This election is, in my mind, almost entirely a referendum. It is almost entirely retroactive. Why? Because an unprecedented historic massacre of children has taken place under this administration. So when in other elections you may vote because I think this candidate will do better or this candidate will do worse, right? In this election, it's like, do I approve of a mass murder of children that's been streamed around the world? I either approve of it and the people who sent the bombs to do it, or I reject it. If I reject it, what do? Do I go vote for Trump? No. Go vote for a third party. Write in somebody you respect. Vote for Jill Stein. That's what I know Jill. I helped set up her campaign. So Jill, I consider a dear friend. Jason Cole, Kelly, that campaign are some of my closest friends, right? I respect them. I know their character. I know who they are. Jill is a Harvard-trained physician who has devoted her life to fighting empire and to fighting these powerful forces, right? This idea that she's some Russian stooge and all this stuff is, look, I even pushed that kind of, excuse my language, bullshit back then, right? I pushed the same stupid arguments back then. But the fact is, you have to, this is a referendum on genocide. That the 2024 election is a referendum on genocide. You either support it or you don't. And that's the moral question on the table.
I just want to say, look, if you're out there of the mindset that we'll push the Democrats left and we're better off under Democrat because they're more pushable left, right? Well, let's just say, how about Palestine? We haven't pushed them left on Palestine, even though it could cost them the election. And just pretending to be left could win them the election. But they can't even shift the position, even hypothetically,
even verbally,
marginally.
Even fake promises.
And so we didn't stop them on Palestine. They carte blanche bombing Gaza. That went to the West Bank, carte blanche bombing the West Bank. Now we're moving into Lebanon, exact same playbook. And you're hearing all the dehumanizing language they used a bit against Gazans, against Lebanese now. And they're making the argument that it's to form a corridor and box in Iran. And
I mean, look, Biden wants to make war against everybody. I mean, it's like, he is a warmonger at heart. He's towards the end of his days, just by virtue of age. I don't know anything about his health more than just looking at his age, right? He clearly is coming towards the end of his life and political career. He just wants to make war. And it is terrifying. And Harris wants to continue those same policies. But Pat, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, you're absolutely right. What they're doing in Lebanon, it is just free reign. There are no restrictions whatsoever right now. It's like, just do whatever you want and we will support it.
And it does, it's interesting, just to go back to the Bernie thing. A lot of people said, well, even if he had been elected, there was nobody there who would support him and he wouldn't be able to get things done. And more and more, I am coming to the very sad realization that it is just the natural progression towards the culmination of capitalism, this imperialist drive to remake the Middle East and have our colonial outposts there help us financially, and we don't care who gets in the way of it. And when people say like, oh, Biden's Netanyahu's bitch and all these like ridiculous things that they did the same with Putin and Trump, it's like, no, there are way bigger forces happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is the key. Look, that's the fundamental issue. Back to that whole thing of how I've evolved. Where I evolved to was looking at a systemic issue rather than a red team, blue team issue. Yeah. And when you look at the systemic issues, it's exactly what you said. It's not that Democrats, even Jill Stein says, it's not that Democrats and Republicans are the same, it's that they're not different enough, right? That's how she says it. I'm not saying it's a uniparty. What it is a unisystem, right? This duopoly is a system that's based, as you say, on capitalism, on predatory behavior. It values corporations over people. It values oligarchs over people. And let me Pat, you triggered a thought before and I forgot it, but it just came back to me. They talk about fascism under Trump. The crackdown on college students that took place over the past, year, still happening. One of the most heinous, disgusting, repugnant things I have ever seen in America. You're talking about kids, okay, and I'm a father, who are protesting the massacre of children. There is no more noble thing that a college student can do with their time, risking their own future and being potentially expelled, potentially arrested. The bravery, the courage, and many of them Jewish, the courage they showed, and for the Democratic Party to accuse them of being anti-Semites, to have hordes of police in riot gear, that is pure fascism. That's not even dancing around the border of authoritarianism or whatever. That is fascism. Literally, you're not allowed to speak. You are going to obey the state. And if you veer 1 point off the propaganda of the state, this is the most propagandized nation on earth. Okay, it just is. People are not, and look, it's hard for people to, just as I said with myself, I got my information from CNN and MSNBC. I used to go on CNN and MSNBC all the time, right? For me, those were neutral outlets, right? They're not neutral. They deliver pure stream of propaganda, controlling and brainwashing and basically inculcating Americans with the belief that you have the red and the blue team. You have to play by these rules. Everything else outside of it is wrong. Everything else outside of it is a crime, a thought crime. And if you do commit that thought crime, we will have cops in riot gear and military gear hunting you down. I mean, that's fascism. What are liberals saying? Well, Trump will bring, that is fascism under Biden and Harris. And it'll be under Trump too. I'm not saying Trump's going to be better on that. Oh, he loved, the crackdowns on the protests, and Republicans did too. The system, Lila, as you're saying, the system is broken, and the system penalizes the poor. It penalizes the homeless. Homelessness is a crime, and it enriches and empowers the rich and powerful. And it will keep doing that if you keep toggling red and blue. I devoted myself this past cycle, and people say, oh, you moved from campaign to campaign. I vowed that I would help every single campaign I could last year. Leela and I sat down at the beginning of 2023, and I said, Leela, I want to make a difference in 2024. I want to help topple this duopoly. I want there to be independent candidates. I worked with Cornel West. I worked with Marianne Williamson. Even Bobby Kennedy called me before the Israel stuff. I didn't really know those positions at the time. Yeah. I talked to everybody. Every candidate who was challenging the system, I was in touch with them or managed their campaign, right? It was like, I'm going to try to make a difference to move the needle towards, third parties, independence, anti-duopoly. Did I make a difference? I don't know. It's, it looks like one of the two major parties is going to win. But in good conscience, it cannot be Kamala Harris, or then we're endorsing genocide. But go ahead.
Did you have a question, Pat?
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, no, I just when you were talking about the crackdown on kids and college kids and fascism, it converges with their media awareness, because they don't get their news anymore from CNN and MSNBC. They are way more into Twitter, TikTok, just the internet sources.
Yep,
and
exactly.
And that's why you're seeing the crackdown on the internet sources, the non-traditional media. And that's why you're seeing the crackdown on college campus protests. And that's why you're seeing cop cities being built everywhere, because they know it's almost impossible to have the stranglehold to direct public opinion anymore. that they used to have.
You're right. And TikTok is a big factor. Let me just say this. I want to pay you both a compliment. I mean, this is objective, independent news and opinion here. You know, you are both reflecting reality to people. And I wish you had a much larger audience. And you have a good audience, and you have an audience that likes you and respects you. And I really appreciate that. And that's why I'm here, because I respect you both and your audience. And I wish you had a 10 times bigger audience, because this is what people need to hear. They need to hear a position outside of the stream of duopoly propaganda, where it's not the red team and the blue team. Oh, they're the good guys, they're the bad guys. That mindset is so toxic, but that's what the vast majority. Now, I will say something about the American people. Deep down, there's a tremendous sense of dissatisfaction with the two parties. If you look at the Gallup poll, 60% of Americans want what they call a third party. Now, we know there are third parties already, but I think what they mean is a really viable, competitive third party, so we have another choice.
Yeah. That
is very promising to me. And I believe, you know, the remainder of my political career, I am just devoting, as I did this cycle, to really breaking down that duopoly and having more choices, because that's democracy. This is not democracy.
No, it's not democracy. And until we get money out of politics, it really can't be a democracy. And until we change our corporate media system, it's been interesting to see, and I'm sort of shocked by it, that they're allowing, well, like CNN had some of the doctors on who corrected the host and said, no, this is a genocide that is happening. Like, we need to be really clear on that. And she didn't cut her off. I mean, a few years ago, they would have, oh, no, we don't want to talk about it that way or use that language. I was sort of shocked that there are, you know, to have Ta-Nehisi Coates use all of his social, political capital right now, but they're letting him on actual mainstream media. So, I mean, I don't know. Listen, nothing is, I mean, what's happening right now in the Middle East with Palestinians and Lebanon, and they're going to turn it on every country there, is horrific. And there's nothing, I'm not like, oh, silver lining. There's no silver lining to any of this. It's horrifying.
And more than that, look, you know, one thing that I think is very important to say, what tends to happen in this propaganda system is things are purposely muddied. Oh, there are two sides to everything. And, you know, well, it might be this, it might be that. And let's, you know, the fact is very simple. Under any international law, international norms, and norms of human decency, you cannot engage in collective punishment against civilians, because even if you say October 7th was a terrorist attack, okay, and that it was a horrible terrorist attack, and let me say, from the very beginning, I said, do not attack civilians. If you're Hamas, if you're Hezbollah, whoever you are, don't attack civilians directly, don't kill children, no matter who you are. I condemn all killings of women, children, civilians, but I'm not going to dictate to the oppressed how to fight their oppressor. So I don't want to fall into that trap either. But let me say this, even if you take the sort of propagandistic point of view of, you know, that was a terrorist attack and it was the most awful thing ever, and Israel has a right to defend itself, and all these phrases you hear, by no standard of international law do you get to then go from there and start wholesale blanket committing atrocities against children, starving an entire population. I keep hearing these, well, if Hamas surrendered, human shields, they have a right to defend it, all these justifications. They are not legitimate justifications. There are no two sides to this. You do not get to commit war crimes and collective punishment and ethnic cleansing against a population. I don't care what garbage excuses you're using for it. The fact is, you know, October 7th, 2023 was horrible and civilians died, and that's a terrible thing. What happened before October 7th? History didn't begin, and we've heard this before. It didn't begin on October 7th. Just in 2023 alone, a lot of people talk going back to 1948 and to the whole history, but just look at 2023. In the 10 months before 10/7/2023, 250 Palestinians were killed by Israel and 6,000 wounded, many of them children, and thousands were imprisoned, detained, raped, and tortured. So October 7th didn't happen in a vacuum. If Israel has the right to then commit all these horrific acts, well, then so did the Palestinians have a right to do October 7th. You have to look at the bigger picture. We have to follow basic laws and rules and just norms of decency. You don't kill children. How hard is that to understand? You don't, I mean, the sites,
oh, no,
you know, I have some claustrophobia, right? And I've seen buildings bombed in Lebanon. I've seen that happen. Can you imagine, can you even put yourself in the shoes of a 10-year-old girl whose body is half broken under a pile of rubble. That dark space, your family's dead around you. You're crying, nobody can hear you. These are horrors being inflicted, horrors, unimaginably barbaric horrors being inflicted with the full support and justification of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, 95% of the Gazans are facing starvation right now. They've killed over 400 healthcare workers. They've killed over almost 150
I think it's
reporters.
178 now, journalists.
178 reporters. These are clear criminal acts that, even if you support their war, you need to say our weapons and our money cannot be used for these criminal acts.
Correct, because then our leadership, and I hate using the word leaders because they're not really leaders, are war criminals. They are war criminals. They're by law. I mean, the ICC has found these to be war crimes.
Right.
And if you're complicit in war crimes, you're a war criminal. I mean, this is very serious stuff. They can be prosecuted down the line. So the idea of you reward them with a vote is outlandish to me. It's outlandish, but it's like Trump, orange man bad. But that's not how the world works.
Do you think that part of the shift amongst some corporate journalists on mainstream media is because there has been now brought up that, just like, with the Nuremberg trials, that anybody who is a propagandist for the Nazi regime is culpable? Do you think that has maybe woken a few people up? Because there does seem to be the slightest more opening to what's happening to reveal the truth right now.
I don't know. It's possible, but the way I see this playing out is, our system is so rife with propaganda that I don't think people really see what's happening. I mean, the conversation we're having here is not a mainstream conversation. The vast majority of people believe Israel has a right to defend itself, and that that this is all okay. Yeah, exactly. And that's how propaganda works. Exactly. But it's not complicated, and if these children, I would say if these children were somewhere else, I don't know. I mean, look what we did to Iraq. I mean, George Bush and Dick Cheney are now the darlings of the Democratic Party. These are guys who committed the worst atrocities and war crimes. 1 million plus people died and were wounded and suffered in a war based on utter and total lies. So I don't know. This country is quite capable. I mean, Afghanistan, Joe Biden, after the withdrawal from Afghanistan and Taliban took over, withdrew money that was feeding Afghanistan. They had mass starvation of children in Afghanistan long before, Gaza happened and all this stuff happened. So this is an administration and a country and a duopoly willing to commit some really horrible things. And all we can do is protest and get beaten by cops for protesting. It's a scary system.
And so
sorry, I'm sorry to bring you. Oh
no, this is our show every twice.
This is our show that we try to keep cheery, but we always go there too. It's hard. It's hard to be cheery in this environment.
Look, we have to. There's room for self-care, and there's room for music, and there's room for art. I'll post a lot of my own music, and the way I survived Lebanon, the way I survived those horrible times in bomb shelters. I had a little shortwave radio my dad had, and I'd listen to the Voice of America playing jazz. And that's how I learned jazz, sitting under rocket fire and listening to, say, Art Tatum or Oscar Peterson on a little shortwave radio. So music and love and art and self-care and mutual aid, these are crucial. Voting, we're not going to vote ourselves out of these problems. The direct action is required, protest is required, and I always call for nonviolence. Me personally, I never call for violence. Others have their own right to do what they want. I believe in protest, speaking out, direct action, mutual aid, and voting. Electoralism has a space. All the things that we can do within our power in an ethical and nonviolent way to make a difference in the world. That's what we have to do. It's required of us as human beings, right? Silence is complicity, right? Watching these children die and saying, "Hey, I'm just going to go about my life," is not an acceptable thing. You guys don't do it, and I respect you for that.
Repulsive, and I'm on the West Coast in Los Angeles with the limousine liberal crowd, and I had a smaller crowd than you, or at least with less notoriety, but they basically, in 2020 disowned me, and it's lonely. So this is where we find community, actually, is with our sort of online left friends, because it's terrifying, actually. I find it terrifying. We're walking like the cognitive dissonance of the people who feel that they are better because they're got their lawn sign out there. But if you ask for a single item on that lawn sign, they tell you to shut the fuck up because you're helping Trump. So that's where we are.
It's a bad place. It's very scary. I have very thick skin because of what I've been through in my life, but I have to say, like, it's mental health is a thing that I think about a lot with people who are seeing the truth. Like, when the veil is lifted and you're looking at the reality, boy, it's hard. It's hard to deal with it. It takes a toll on health, on mental health, on physical health, and it's deeply depressing. And it's depressing that nothing has been done. It's a year now of nonstop slaughter of children, and there's a feeling of powerlessness that's terrifying.
And I think that sort of learned helplessness is something a lot of us on the left are feeling now, because, when we came to podcasting, it was like, okay, let's raise awareness on this stuff. But I think the public largely is aware. I would disagree with you a little bit on that, because I think the public largely is on the side of Palestine. They're silent because they're Democrats and they don't want that to be a part of it. But the learned helplessness that I'm going through is protesting and raising awareness has gotten us nowhere. So I'm not saying I'm advocating for violence, but I'm advocating for some direct action and where we go next that actually impacts capitalism in a way that we can get something changed. And that's the struggle. What will they listen to change policy? Because public opinion doesn't matter. They won't even change policy a little bit to win the election, to allegedly save democracy.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's very well said. And look, maybe you're right. I guess I mean that these are not mainstream views really, but you're right. There are many, many, many people in America who see what's going on and know that it's wrong. But to Lila's point before, a lot of them are going to swallow it and vote for Kamala Harris because they have been convinced that Trump is this. Look, Trump to me is just another ordinary Republican. I mean, having fought Bush and Cheney back in the 2000s, those guys were horrible. And all the, these Lincoln Project types, these are the people who laid the groundwork for Trump. They laid the groundwork.
And stole an election. Like, they had a successful insurrection in 2000.
In 2000, right, with the Supreme Court, right?
Like, come on, what are we talking about? They started a war based on a lie. Like, there's no comparison, actually. I mean, Trump is repugnant, but he has nothing on George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. Nothing.
Yeah, I mean, just sheer numbers alone. But look, Trump is bad, and it's going to be scary if he wins, and we're going to have to fight it, and we're going to have to, do everything we can to protest his policies that we disagree with. I mean, it is what it is. Now, I hope Jill wins, but it's a long shot,
Well, okay, we have had you here quite a bit longer than you had the time for. So, I don't want to move on to another aspect if you're feeling, we're thrilled to have you, but also I want to be cognizant of your time.
I'm fine to talk a few more minutes. I feel really good being here. I have to say, Pat, I feel you sort of look like my brothers. I have, I'm from a large family. I feel a kinship with you, actually. Sometimes when you're, you get in a fight with somebody, and you realize they're right, there's a certain after the fact, it's like, damn, he put up a good fight. I respect you at the fight you put up. Like, you tried to take me down, and you came pretty close. And but I learned from my mistakes, thankfully, and I leaned into what you all were teaching me, really. So I do respect that. But I feel a certain kinship with you, and Lila, I respect you so much, and Leela loves you guys too. So I'm happy to be here. If you want to go over a few other things, I'm fine. If whatever you guys want, I'm here.
Well, I would love to just talk a little bit about what they're doing to third-party voters, or I don't know, Pat, what do you think? We have so many different angles we could go. We have, we get a maximum of 100 graphics and videos in our studio.
And it's not enough for Lila.
And it's not. I'm always like having to. We have so many different things we could go. But like, where do you want to go,
run with wherever you'd like to go with this. I mean, I think the great third parties, since you were so in the know and part of these campaigns, I think that's what we should end on.
Okay.
I would like to talk about that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'm just fascinated. Did you say that Democratic operatives would call up major private college institutions or universities and threaten to withhold funding?
There was a situation where Marianne Williamson was slated to do something with some college dams. I don't remember which state, and they called up and canceled it because their funding was threatened by the party, by the DNC. And now, I'm sort of paraphrasing and sort of summarizing the situation. I don't know the exact details, but it was something along those lines and other stuff like that. Look, the thing with third parties, this idea of the spoiler, and look, I pushed that spoiler argument against Jill when I worked for Hillary. Excuse me, and I was dead wrong. If we have a democracy, there is no such thing as a spoiler in a democracy, period. A democracy is about choice. Would you walk into, if the three of us decided to go have it, well, I don't drink, but if we decide to have a meal together or a coffee or something like that, we walked into a restaurant and there were only 2 items on the menu, we'd walk right out. If we went into a store, let's say you walked into a Target or a Walmart and you needed to buy an item, and the entire shelves were empty except for just 2 items, you'd say, okay, it's, what's going on here, right? The fact that we're forced to accept that there are only 2 horrible, crappy choices every single election, and then somehow we call it democracy, is to me just like outrageous. It's outrageous. So how do we fix it? We do have first past the post voting. We don't have ranked choice voting. We have a system that naturally leads towards 2 parties. There's actually a principle or a theory, it slips my mind, that these types of systems will naturally lead to 2 parties. However, George Washington himself, in his farewell address, railed against parties. He hated the idea of parties, right? And so I hate referring back to slave owners and slaveholders as some sort of authorities, right? But they were the founders of this nation and the original colonial project, right? If I can just do a quick aside, J.D. Vance yesterday said something like, if you're here illegally in this country, get ready to be kicked out. I'm looking at him like, you mean just about everybody? Exactly, right? But again, George Washington railed against the party system because he knew how bad it would be and how dangerous that factionalism would happen. Now, here's the problem. The system is set up where the onerous ballot access rules. I had to make myself a quasi-expert on ballot access because I was managing Cornel West's campaign and then helping set up Jill Stein's campaign, where I had to really start understanding how the system worked. The ballot access process is designed to keep out third parties. And if you manage to somehow pass that hurdle, the DNC will sick all their lawyers on you to basically sue you to smithereens. It's like, it's expensive. So they have the most expensive lawyers in the country who will just sue you and sue frivolous lawsuits one after the other, and you go broke trying to defend yourself. So the system is set up to prevent third parties, to bar third parties. So this idea that, well, if people wanted third parties, then Jill Stein would do better or so-and-so would do better. Well, the fact is the system is designed to crush third parties. Pat, back to your point of how do we break through all this? I do believe if we can create the space for a third party, I thought this was the cycle. I thought between Kennedy, West, Stein, and others, this cycle, there may have been a movement towards, oh, wow, we have other choices, get the ballot access, raise money. It hasn't quite played out that yet, even though, Jill is running a great campaign and, Dr. West is still out there doing his campaign. But the fact is, that's how we start breaking it. If we can put a crack in the duopoly, get 5% say for the Green Party and go from there. That is the first step towards people saying, you know what, because people want those choices. So this idea of a spoiler is pure anti-democracy, and it's coming from Democrats. There is no spoiler in a democracy. I get the right to make my choice.
Well, what's interesting is the messaging that third parties are bad is coming from Democrats.
Yes,
but if you look at the chart and change in public opinion supporting third parties, the biggest increase in support for third parties comes from Democrats. They are the most disillusioned group out there.
Exactly.
Because if you're a Republican, you're not disillusioned with Trump. You may not love where the country is, but you're not like, he disappointed me, didn't do what he said he was going to do. You buy it enough. But if you're a Democrat, you're like, you didn't do jack shit for 8 years. I mean,
and people are suffering. Look, I wish I had it in front of me. I have if I can just quickly find this, because this is something that, if it's okay, just give me like 30 seconds. I want to read this. This is a post that I keep posting over and over again, right? It's basically what has happened to the U.S. under two-party rule. I'm just going to read a quick list. Record high homelessness, record high suicide rates, cost of living soaring, bankruptcy surging, child poverty rising, widespread food insecurity, 25% of adults go hungry at times, minimum wage stagnant, credit card debt crisis, student loan debt crisis, wealth inequality, millions without healthcare, people crowdfunding healthcare, on and on, life expectancy plummeting, unrelenting gun violence. It goes on and on and on. So fundamentally, this two-party system is causing widespread suffering among the people. If you do a class analysis versus this whole sort of partisan analysis, it's basically the vast majority of working people, or the working class, and non-working people. When I say working class, it's everybody who's not that 1% super wealthy or super powerful, are struggling and suffering. They don't have proper health care. And so this marginal distinctions that Democrats will do a little better on this or a little better on that. I understand if reproductive rights matter to you, you're going to want to vote for a Democrat. But then again, if abortion to you is murder, because for many principled conservatives, abortion is a criminal thing to do. You are killing a child in their view, right? So they come at it from what they believe is a principled place. There should not be abortion. Right. But these are legitimate differences, right? But fundamentally, the vast majority of people in this country and around the world under this, this predatory system we live, there has to be a better way that humans can interact. I'm not a communist. I'm not a socialist. If anything, I'm probably closest to being an anarchist along the lines of a David Graeber, where we sort of have like a sort of like, an even system that doesn't have power and coercion as the means of how we communicate with one another. No power dynamics, no coercive dynamics. So people don't understand what anarchism is. They think it's anarchy, right? But really, it's a system whereby we really do away with power dynamics among groups and individuals, right? So for me, I don't care what you call it. Yeah. But there has to be a better way we can organize this world and how humans can interact. And this is everywhere. It's not just here. Look at what's happening in Sudan. Look what's happening in Ukraine. Look what's happening all across the world. People are struggling and living on $1 or $2 a day. When you have trillionaires, we're almost going to have trillionaires soon. They're up to $200-300 billion. I mean, the system is broken.
A zero-sum game. I mean, that is capitalism, right? Like there's a reason that we steal all of the resources from other countries, and they are, child labor in
Congo, right? You have child slavery in Congo to do our iPhones here. There has to be a better way, and there are better ways. And, if you think of Marxism, if you think of capitalism, if you go back and read, the Adam Smiths and the Marx and others, and I'm not a social or political scientist or an economist by any means, but even if you just do some fundamental reading of different systems and philosophies, and there's so many, humans have tried very different ways of organizing human interactions. We're all beings on this earth. We're lost in space. We don't know why we're here. We don't know where we go after we die. It's this sort of difficult existence. But for it to be made even more difficult and more violent, there has to be something better we can do. And we're not going to do it in our lifetimes, and I hope humans survive long enough. Who knows?
Just to put a little touch of optimism in there, I do think the labor movement the labor movement is the most optimism I can see out there. And I think what we need to do is literally hold capitalism hostage as often as possible to change policy, because the system is so captured that, if we're going to vote our way out by changing ranked choice voting and whatnot. And I worked for a voting group. I was the executive director temporarily, which is shame on them, by the way. But even in that space, there were larger groups, and they were corporate captured, and they were against our ideas because we didn't pay the dues on the way up to get to where we were to have such a voice in this space. Yeah. So I think capitalism is so captured that it's the labor movement or bust at this point. I mean, I still think, yes, let's get ranked choice voting passed. Let's work on electoral reforms, but don't wait on them. Yeah, we can't wait on them.
That's a good point. That's a great point. And you're right. I think that's a really good point.
And I would like to live to see the change and to see my grandchildren and my kids grow up healthy.
But the younger generation, having, being a dad myself, you're right, Pat, that TikTok and other social media platforms, that's why they want to ban it, of course, is waking up a generation. Yeah. I have a teen, and they really, really, really see the world in a way where they're seeing things that the propaganda system doesn't want them to see. Right. And that gives me a lot of hope. If I could I just say one thing about music? I didn't like having music set up behind me. I mean, music is my life, and music is what I do, and music is what I did. And, politics is still sort of like, it was going to be a side thing, and it's turned into 25 years of my life. But I have to say, it's like music is so important.
That's what I say about my husband. No, I'm kidding.
Really? Sorry. But all, it's important that we maintain a certain level of, sort of center ourselves and make sure we take care of ourselves and make sure that look, we're, the
It's what we're
world
fighting for, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. We're fighting. It's really good and evil. I have a very, there are a lot of different, ancient philosophies that talked about a much more sort of dualistic. You're either on the side of good or evil, and sometimes life is not that easy. But there are circumstances, and we're on one right now where, look, you're either on the side of killing children or you're not, and that's a good versus evil. And if we choose good, and people like you are choosing the side of good and fighting for good, that's beautiful. And it's all we can do, right? What else can we do? We're on this earth for a short period of time, relatively. I'm in my late 50s, I'm approaching my 60s, and I'm starting to look back rather than forward. And it's like, what else are we here for if not to love one another and to just do good in the world, right? And that matters. It may sound corny, but in the end, what else are we here for? We got to speak out. The kid that's buried in rubble, the kid that can't eat, the kid that doesn't have health care, the kid that's caged at the border, not knowing where its parents are, that's who we have to speak out for. Absolutely. There's nothing more important than doing that, other than taking care of our loved ones. It's all we can do in this world. So, and I really appreciate that you guys gave me this platform, and I really
Peter,
respect you both so much. Yeah,
thank you for coming on, Pat.
I mean, I'm here for a few more minutes. You want to talk about some of the other stuff? I'm good to do it. You want to lighten it up, Pat? I'm good. Whatever you want.
No, well, we wanted to show a few of the tweets, but I feel like maybe. All right, we'll just. I didn't even pull the funny ones. I just pulled a few of my tweets to set the stage for who you were, but I didn't. I think people know who you are, but let's just show them real quick and consider this as like a picture of your ex, and you're going to burn it. And Peter Daou is dead forever. I don't know. Something like that work.
I'm good with that. Yeah, I'm good with that. Go for it.
Now I feel like this is just a pet project of me showing off my tweets or something. But these are the things that the Democratic Party are kind of saying now, I think. And
they are. I mean, this narrative is still very valid today. It just applies to different people, but it's still valid.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about hating, that's okay. That I don't understand. I mean, obviously this was, one of Pat's tweets making fun, a parody tweet, but like to see the vitriol that anybody gets if they point out anything about Kamala Harris or Biden at any point in the run up to an election, after they're in, you give them a chance, then it's midterms, then it's anything, it's fuck you, you're helping Trump, we don't need you anyway, and you cost us the election. And that is the script. It's so wild to see.
And I was doing all of that. And you actually do, like, I don't think they're, the vast majority of people who are doing this now at the top levels of the party, they know these things work and they push them. Running ads against Jill, doing all that stuff. But for your rank and file Dem actually believes this. I believed it at the time, and I hope others can also just open your eyes, because the system doesn't give two F's about you. Neither the Democrats nor the Republicans. Nancy Pelosi's off insider trading. She's making $120 million. She doesn't give a shit. I mean, she is so lauded, Pelosi, right? But I worked inside that system. Pelosi and Biden, they praise Republicans all day. Kamala Harris praising Republicans. Why? They're all in it together. When I lived in D.C. and I worked for these candidates, they used to all be at the same steakhouses together and the same parties. And I was invited to a few parties where it'd be Republicans and Democrats together, sort of hobnobbing. They're all buddies. And they're interested in their own power and their own parties and their own insider this or that, and they don't give a damn. And they like just fundraising off these issues. The Democrats could have easily codified Roe, and they didn't.
Yeah.
So
and to have Kamala run on, we're going to have a Republican in my cabinet, and like that's
an existential threat.
Yeah, they're Nazis. Now we're going to reach across the aisle to them. Like, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Pat. Sorry.
No. I don't want to keep showing the tweets, honestly. So I'm over that. Okay. But I feel like the important part is that we're seeing now a lot of what you did. And I appreciate you come from the space of not only acknowledging that that's not the right way, but like the one thing you offered through your public transformation is a path to also say, oh, I see things differently now. And there is literally no other example out there of somebody who pushed the advocacy in the way that you did and now sees it as incorrect and bad for the public. So
nobody.
And let me tell you guys, it was I laugh, because for a period, Pat, you were one of the early ones who trusted me, and I respect that so much. And it could have burned you. I could have turned out to be not genuine, but I always knew that I was authentic, and people like you and Brianna Joy Gray and others embraced my transformation, my evolution early on, and I respect that a lot. But let me tell you, even over the past year, when I was working with Dr. West and others, it's like he's some sort of a nefarious DNC op who's trying to topple this campaign or that campaign. I was like, guys, do you have any idea how much power and money I left behind ditching the party? If I wanted to enrich myself, I had 2 presidential campaigns under my belt.
Yeah.
I would have had unlimited corporate work. Put on my suit and just gotten all the work in the world and just pushed the party line. I mean, I literally burned my connections to do this. I used to be on MSNBC and CNN all the time. Now, once I turned independent leftist, done. Never invited again.
If you were a Dick Cheney war criminal, you'd have your own MSNBC show.
Yeah, exactly. So like, it's funny to me, like, there's no money in independence and leftism in this country. Yeah. The money is in the establishment. The power is in the establishment. Yeah. This is the stuff that's hard. Doing this, and I'm not talking about myself. My life, I've lived a difficult childhood and I've been through a lot, but I'm not going through hard times right now myself. Although there isn't really another myth about me that somehow I'm wealthy. I'm a paycheck to paycheck guy, always have been. I never pursued money. So, you see, I laugh because Lila and I, sometimes people say Peter Daou net worth, and you'll search it on the internet, it'll say like 15 million or $20 million. And my kids look at me like, really, Dad? We have all that money? Like, no. Sorry. Like, no, I can't afford this for you, that for you. And we got to watch out where we're shopping. And,
Right.
Not to make this about me again, but literally, yes. And the universe has brought me some Peter Douche things recently. Yesterday, I got a notification from my credit card company that Amazon billing for my book, and it was written out to Douche Industries because that's what I named the thing. They had overcharged or something. So that was one piece of it. And then I told my parents, oh, I'm having Peter Daou on, the book I wrote about it. Yeah. They're like, oh, we just had some Daou wine last night.
So Daou wine,
which is not, I know, yours.
Well, no, I have nothing to do with them. However, all the Daous originate from a small village in the mountains of Lebanon called Lahfed, Lehfed. I assume those Daous are somehow distant relatives or cousins because it's a very small family line. Daou in Arabic means light. Daou, it means light. So those guys had some big tech company, sold it, bought the winery, and then they sold that too. I don't know them. I've never spoken to them, but everybody who I meet just randomly, oh, I love Daou wine.
They love the wine, right?
Yeah, they love the wine. It's good. It's good for the Daou name, but I don't know those guys. I assume we're related somehow, though.
Well, when you find out, I'll hit you up for a case of Pinot Noir.
There you go. They make
Peter,
good wine. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on. We have taken double, 3 times the time, but we've loved every second of it. Your journey was really inspiring for so many of us. And the fact that you will speak out so loudly and welcome the wrath of the, Keith Olbermanns and all the gross people who probably used to be in your circle is really something to commend. So thank you.
Thank you both so much. Thank you very much.
Appreciate the hell out of you, and you're welcome to come back anytime and skip all the Peter Douche stuff and just talk politics because
whatever you guys want. Happy to come back. Happy to come back. I consider you guys family right now, so thank you.
Oh, that's so lovely. Thank you.
Cheers.
Take care.
Thank you both.
Cheers.
All right. See you all.
Bye. Wow, what a full circle moment. You emotional, Pat? That was pretty special. That was pretty cool.
Little bit. We planned to show some tweets to set it up, but then it was like, we don't want to do that. Let's get into the politics. And then at the end, it felt sort of like self-serving, like let's show some tweets making fun of him, but it wasn't making fun of him, but it
was just the message.
I just want to let it go. He doesn't deserve it anymore. So cheers to him.
I think that's wonderful. Cheers to him. We'll have a little bit more time. We're gonna try to bring a little bit of joy and light just in the midst for a couple moments before we get right back into it, because that's how we roll. But let's spin the wheel and just see what it brings us.
It's gonna bring some beer, I think, to my throat. There we go.
Hey, before we do that though, sorry, I'm going to close this out because I know a few people were so incredibly generous. So we will do a timeline cleanse. I've got a ton of wine, my huge second fishbowl glass. But we wanted to thank first, because I saw Lynn is in the chat today and we didn't have a chance to thank her last week when we had Jordan Sheridan on. So thank you, Lynn. We thanked you on our show, on our last show, but I'm not sure if you were in the chat. And then also we have a couple other very generous super chats. Thank you, Macarius, Punch Up Pod membership. Cheers to you. And also cheers again. Thank you. We are small but mighty. Kimmy, so kind. Thank you. Best YouTube channel, best host, best audience. You guys all rock. Thank you, Kimmy. That's really so nice. Oh my goodness. And here's Lynn again. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You guys are awesome. Really, we're so grateful. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Pat, do you want to be the one to choose the timeline cleanse?
Oh, do we just overriding and saying it's timeline cleanse? Sure.
No, that's what it landed on.
Didn't it land on a shot? Oh, I don't know.
No, I just always
timeline cleanse.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about talking to strangers, which is very difficult. When you don't know someone, you don't know how to talk to them. But this is a tip, and this is it's called the Ford method. And I did not invent this. Some of you guys know what this is. It's an acronym for talking to strangers. It's Ford, and the first one is family. People like to talk about their families, unless they're at like a work function and they're trying to cheat on their spouse. They want to talk about their families. So you ask them. It's like, do you have a family? Are your parents still alive? Do you still talk to them? Do you have any siblings? Who are still alive. So you want to talk about family stuff. Ask them about family. O stands for occupation. People want to talk about this too, and it's very comfortable. People talk about, do you support the two-state solution to the continued genocide of Palestinian people? So if you meet someone, just right up top, you just ask them up top how they feel about this. And that sort of is like a jump start to the conversation. And then there's R and D, and this R it's recreational drugs. And this brings us to our next thing.
He's good. I like him. Stephen Haas. I don't know who he is.
I just saw that. That's all I've ever seen of him, but I liked it.
That was a good find. Well done.
Hey, look at that.
All right. Should we do you want to talk a little about what's happening electorally? Like truly, what a total. This is normally our shit show, but we didn't want anybody to think that was.
We didn't want to soil Peter Daou
with our
the shit
ridiculous
show.
Name. But yeah, what a friggin' shit show. So, but this is the best part of it. Like, if this is all you take from it, you might be like, I mean, I don't give a shit because I hate both of these people. But, you know, if you're a Democrat, like, all right, look at that. Let's look at what it looks like on the map when you take out the toss-up states, and actually put them in the category where they are right now. This is what the electoral map looks like.
Right. And so the idea that this is a coin flip is based on, you know, if we didn't have the Electoral College, it's a coin flip. But if you have an Electoral College, we are not anywhere near a coin flip right now. We are heavily in Trump wins this election camp.
Yeah, we really are, which is why, yeah. So, and this, okay, so we have two different swing state graphics here. This one, I am sure, is the aggregate of sort of better rated polls. So in this one,
yeah, this is CNN putting the best spin on this they could.
Right. Yeah. So it's a little bit more, you know, coin toss-y. However, if you go to the next graphic, which is the Real Clear Politics one, which takes all of the polls that are out, Trump is up in every single swing state except for Wisconsin. And just to break down what's happening in Michigan, especially where there is a large Arab American, Muslim American population, right now, Muslim voters in Michigan, 40% of them are opting for Jill Stein. which is why they're all coming out. I mean, Tom Hartman wrote one of the most disgusting articles this past week about Jill Stein. And it wasn't even just that she's a spoiler. It was, I mean, the language that he used about her was, I mean, running for president, dangerous game, could put fascist Trump back in the White House. Again, as we were just talking about, there is a fascist already in the White House who is committing a genocide. Running for president and keeping an iron grip on the once noble Green Party has become Stein's singular mission, and she's killing the party and its once sterling reputation in the process. I don't even know how you could say she's killing the party. It's actually had its most, like, and it keeps going on. There's so many other bits, but what is he talking about?
It's amazing. The weird thing I'm seeing right now is you're seeing the fake left progressives, and I'm going to put Tom Hartman in there now, because what is this article? I mean, look, he's historically been very left, but like, you're seeing all these people all of a sudden that were progressive. I mean, we're going to put AOC in that group, but she's beyond that, but they're all attacking third parties when they should be joining the third parties. Meanwhile, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, I heard today on the radio a 30-minute NPR piece supporting Palestine. So something is shifting,
right?
And I think the Democratic Party has lost its grasp on some of the mainstream media, and so they purchased some of these other elements. I'm not saying Tom Hartman is necessarily purchased, but it feels like some of the leftists that have abandoned the left, maybe to compensate for their loss of power in this situation, because at some point the media is the mainstream media is opening up more pro-Palestine opinions in their newsrooms.
They are. And then yet, and this, I'm just going to, like, I have to just show this totally out of the blue, but this was insane to me. This is in New York. Somebody writes, this is
the Weather Channel.
Stop Anti-Semitism account says, why is the Weather Channel sharing ads featuring a keffiyeh, a symbol now associated with violence against Jews, post 10/7? So, I mean, deranged, like completely unhinged take on some joyous woman wearing a scarf because it's getting cold, because it's the Weather Channel. This is the Weather Channel's response. The Weather Company and its consumer brand, the Weather Channel, are widely recognized for our integrity and the trust we have with the public. We deeply apologize to anyone we offended through the inadvertent selection of an image in our recent ad campaign. We certainly don't support or condone any form of anti-Semitism, including wearing an article of clothing. We immediately remove the ad upon recognition of our mistake. I mean, I guess it is really just capital. Like, they're worried they're going to lose some sponsors.
They are, but that statement is just so, it's saying we think a keffiyeh, whatever, is anti-Semitic. Like, it's not. So get rid of that. If you're going to be a corporate brand, you need to learn how to navigate this stuff without caving in a way that basically supports that shitty position you caved to. I mean,
it's really gross. Yeah. The idea that, you know, and Kamala Harris still says it, her Walls says it, the rape on October 7th, they're going to keep talking about October 7th like we haven't seen. And I mean, yes, we know decades this has been going on, but even if you want to pretend it all started on the October 7th, which is ridiculous, but okay, even if you do, every day since then has been drastically more atrocious, disgusting, horrific, shared with glee by these IDF soldiers. Like, there is no comparison. And this, okay, so I have two different names for the person who shared this with me, and I don't want to say the wrong one, so forgive me. I think here it's run to tweet, but I don't want to say it wrong, so I'm sorry if I do. Shared with me that at his alma mater at Penn State, or shared with us, they were doing this lovely, I mean, very, meaningful tribute to all of the victims of Israel's genocide in Palestine, and there were all these little flags planted on the ground.
Right.
And now the Stop Arab Hate account has been sharing, I mean, dozens of students at Penn State, some of them like this lady in public relations, but like they are putting up underneath, I don't know if you can see, but it's get this off my lawn, get these, other people get these terrorists off my lawn. Somebody today was picking them out.
There's
of
video
the
of
lawn.
someone yanking them. Yeah.
I mean, so some of that propaganda and that hatred has been so deeply instilled in some of these people. It's to see a kafia and be like, think that's anti-Semitic is really.
It's just been so reinforced by our mainstream media that it's so easy to say that's a symbol of anti-Semitism, like that.
Just their existence.
It's disgusting. I do want to go back to.
Oh yeah, sorry. I know I took us off track.
No, not at all. But to the point, to bring this to electoral politics and why. Look, Kamala shouldn't win. I agree with Peter Daou on the moral,
100%.
The moral
imperative
that she not win, which does not mean the moral imperative that Trump wins. But also, I just want to say how this is going to play out. If we're just doing the fun of this, let's fall like it's a sport. Who's going to win the race? The media has been opening up more and more pro-Palestine stuff. We're seeing more of it. Our normie Dem friends are seeing more of it, and it's not going to play well. And when Fox News runs a special showing the atrocities, you're in deep shit if you're Kamala Harris and you're not putting any distance between yourself and these policies.
That's a really good point. I mean, the fact that, as far as I know, and I mean, I don't watch Fox, so I just saw this clip that we have, but
well, they're probably doing it to hurt her. I mean, on their side.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, probably.
But it will hurt her.
It will. And shame on every other journalist in our country who for a year has said nothing, knowing that first they spread lies on CNN at the beginning, and they have anchors who continue to about mass rape. But then, at the beginning, it was the babies, the babies and onions, the ovens, the sliced open mother's belly, like all the thing that Anthony Blinken said that he saw the people sitting at their dinner table. I mean, all these lies, right, with parts of their limbs taken off and everything that they spread. And then knowing that actual journalists are being targeted. And even as Peter said, like this one kid, I mean, we've seen it, hundreds of times. We saw it before October 7th, but, journalists who are wearing press all over them get notices saying, stop spreading these, lies. Of course, they're not lies, but, or we'll get you. And a week later, they shot 3 young kids, 3 of them. And one of them died for sure. And I don't know what's with the other 2, but that it was a Fox journalist who does a segment on protecting journalists from Israel.
Amazing. And let's just show it. Here it is. It's a minute, so it's not too long.
There are so many neighborhoods that are flattened. Palestinians that are internally displaced will simply have no homes to return to. And while we get a first-hand look at the destruction here, it's important to remember that Palestinian journalists do not have this access. They have been pushed to the south. Dozens have been killed.
There's this false narrative about Palestinian journalists. More than 100 of them have been killed by Israel since the war began. And I take very few positions in the conflicts that we cover. But let this be a position that I take. Journalists, specifically Palestinian journalists, must be protected amid the war. The Israelis have killed journalists in drone strikes. They've killed them with small arms fire, and it's unacceptable.
Man, yeah. It's unacceptable, and there has been almost nothing said on CNN and MSNBC that I've seen. So it's just truly vile, by the way, it was the Runs too who shared that with us about Penn State. I just scrolled back, found it. Just wanted to say, yeah. Okay, what about some of the ads? Do you want to show any of that? I mean, I don't know. Where do you want to go? We have like 20 minutes. What do you want to? Which way are we going? There's so much to talk about. My goodness.
Okay, let's stick with the third parties for a second and show the ad. This is the so they're and this is not a super PAC ad. This is actually from the Democratic Party supporting Kamala, attacking Jill Stein. Nothing on policy, just Jill Stein on wrecking the election. And you won't even debate this person. You're such
gonna ruin it. She's such a
cowards.
spoiler. Yeah.
But you're going to run an ad about this person that you've been smearing forever. And this is just another smear campaign. It's only 30 seconds. Here you go.
Jill Stein, Green Party candidate for president. So why are Trump's close allies helping her? Stein was key to Trump's 2016 wins in battleground states. She's not sorry she helped Trump win. That's why a vote for Stein is really a vote for Trump.
Jill Stein, I like her very much. You know why? She takes 100% from them.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
I mean, it is so sick. And by the way, to talk about, I mean, it's just so funny that they talk about, who's not a real Democrat, right? You're not a real Democrat. That was the thing that was at Bernie all the time, and as we pointed out, at least he was never a real Republican like Liz Warren and Hillary Clinton. But all this like trying to taint her with taking money from Republicans or anybody who's ever supported Republicans. And Tom Hartman does a bit on this also in his article that like she hired a lawyer who had worked for Trump. Well, it is again one of these self-fulfilling prophecies that, it's like, oh, if the New York Times doesn't run a story, but an independent journalist does, and it's true, but nobody sees it. And if you point it out to the normie Dem, they'll be like, well, why wasn't it in the mainstream media? Like, why wasn't it in the New York Times?
Can't be true.
Probably can't be true, right? So then it becomes, and it's the same thing. It's like, well, why is she only working with Republicans? Well, I mean, Democrats made it very clear that they would blacklist anybody who worked even for a progressive, let alone a third party candidate, right? So, but if you're going to taint people because they work with Republicans, and then you are going to say, not only are you honored to have the endorsement of Dick Cheney, you're going to campaign with his 93% voting Trump record daughter, Liz Cheney. You're going to tout the fact that 200 plus staffers from George W. Bush and who was the other Republican?
Romney, Cheney, McCain.
Yeah, McCain, Romney. Yeah, all endorse you. Like, I don't know. Is it good to make peace with Republicans? Is it bad? Is it only only if you're in the highest echelons of power? Like, what is the metric here?
Well, the only area we know that she publicly says she's going to be different than Biden on is she's going to have more Republicans in her cabinet. That's the only thing she can find to be different on is more Republicans. And that's more than the guy who got elected saying he was going to work across the aisle. And there was no compromise whatsoever. It's anyone following politics knows that didn't work. So she's running on the thing that didn't work, but more Republicans in power.
Because we need a strong two-party system. Yeah. And by the way, I mean, I'd be so happy for a strong two-party system. That would be a huge improvement. Yeah. That would be 100% improvement from our one party that we have right now.
Even on messaging, the Democrats are so bad at it because up until a month ago, the whole message was save democracy. Voting is at stake. And now you're running an actual ad attacking a third party.
Yep.
So that doesn't go unnoticed for some people. Like, I'm not saying that ad doesn't work on some people as well too, but you're not saving democracy. You got shooed in overnight with some phone calls and you're attacking third parties. You're litigating against them everywhere. I mean, we know this, so I won't go into my rant, but
no, but okay. So here's the other thing. And, we wanted to let Peter really be able to speak. So I didn't want to keep interjecting. So forgive us for sort of like going back over some of the stuff that we were, some subjects that we were sort of talking about before. But Barack Obama, as we've talked about, he's come out of his money cave, 3 times? 1, to crush Bernie. 2, to crush the basketball strike after George Floyd's murder. And
basically now the new one is the "you ain't black" one, kind of.
So he goes and talks to this group of people, and what was the actual conference? I don't know, but he was Black men. I don't know exactly what this was. Wait 1 second. I think we have it here. Sorry, I need my eyes here. So this is the reporter who was there, Erica G, who I don't know, but anyway, it was in Pennsylvania. Okay. You're coming up with all kinds of reasons and excuses. I've got a problem with that, he said, because part of it makes me think, and I'm speaking to men directly, part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for that. Like genocide's not bad enough. He said that women in our lives have been getting our backs this entire time. When we get in trouble and the system isn't working for us, they're the ones out there marching and protesting. And now you're thinking about sitting out or supporting somebody who has a history of denigrating you, because you think that's a sign of strength, because that's what being a man is, putting women down. That's not acceptable. And while, of course, I 100% agree that voting for Trump is not the answer, pretending that the problem is this woman who made her career on locking mostly Black men up, keeping them in jail, even when there was exculpatory evidence, or past their parole time because we needed them for cheap firefighting labor, that is sexism, is so repugnant.
Let me just tell you, I have a lot of Black friends. Not that is like,
We're telling you a joke. Is this for real? Is that how you're really?
This is real. I know I have a lot of Black friends in California.
Yeah.
And they don't like Kamala, and they knew a lot of that stuff about her political history in California without me telling them. Because they know my stance on politics, and they're not following my show or watching my shit.
Right.
But they knew about the prison stuff, prison labor,
getting mothers arrested for truancy.
Yeah, they knew that stuff. And from my personal experience, they're supporting Palestine, and that's a big issue that I see. On the flip side, I don't think they criticize Dems for bailing on abortion as much as, and it may be a cultural thing. It may just be my small segment of people, but again, like California is irrelevant electorally because we're going to go Dem. So it doesn't really matter, but I just don't think these tropes are insulting to a lot of people. And when they cart out Obama to criticize Black people, I think a lot of people, especially a lot of young people, are just like, Obama, what? Who? Like, we know who you are, but like, here you are. We never hear from you, and you're telling us, well, we might be thinking what we're thinking because she's a woman.
Yeah. By the way, like, what does it mean then? But if you vote for Jill Stein, it's because you're racist. Like they have to keep like modulate. Oh, that's not because you're sexist. It's like there was Chris Smalls, the labor the leader of Amazon, put out a tweet saying that Obama's never been there to congratulate them on anything, but here he is now with this. One that I thought was interesting was Wendell Pierce. Remember the whole thing with like the violent Bernie bros and everything? The
violent Bernie bros, and then he like punched a female Bernie bro in an elevator.
Yeah, and was arrested. This guy right here, the Wire Star, Wendell Pierce, arrested for attacking Bernie Sanders supporters in Atlanta hotel. But even he actually, and I mean, this does make me think the tides are turning a little bit, because Obama for Democrats is like a sacred being, right? Like he is the pinnacle of everything Democrats like to believe about themselves.
Right. He's our Reagan, basically.
Yeah. They're whatever. Yeah.
They're Reagan.
But he put out this whole long tweet, and we don't have to really read every bit of it, but basically coming to support the fact that, no matter, I mean, it's still gross because he's basically saying like, hey, lay off Black people. We always support the Democrat and most of us are going to be voting for Kamala Harris. So don't worry. But I do think that this messaging is so mean-spirited. It's not intended actually to deliver more votes. Nobody who is berated the way Barack Obama did that, or who is a Jill Stein supporter and then sees that ad is going to be like, oh yeah, now you're right. She's a spoiler. I won't vote. Like,
yeah, you're right. I'm misogynist, and that's why I wasn't going to vote for her. It's not Palestine. It's not her record in California. It's not,
You got me. Yeah. Good point.
I'm so bummed strike didn't come up during Peter Daou.
I know, because you had a funny line. I
was going to bring up my gay rescue, my undocumented gay rescue cat of color, and say that wasn't her, him. But
well, maybe
that's
next
from the book.
time. Next time we'll stage it. We've got to have a stage.
I did want to see if he could laugh about any of it, but it just didn't seem right when he's talking so seriously about all these things that are really important, and I just didn't want to go there. Sorry.
I think he has a very healthy sense of humor about all of it. I think right now it's just such a devastating time. It's just horrifying. Reflect the Sun, you're amazing. Thank you so much. Cheers to you and all of the memberships you've gifted. Thank you. It means so much to us.
You are a hero, Shiro, all of that. Hero.
Shiro. Okay, so what do you think? It's a long show. I know we have a ton to talk about, but I mean, we're not going to open up a whole new segment, right? What do you think? Where are you?
Well, let's hear from Kamala this week. This is sort of a say what. So she's out there right now.
Even more.
I mean, we have some tangible issue related critiques. COVID. We'll save the COVID stuff from her for next show. But here she was speaking at a country over party event, which is our Democrats hosting a country over party event.
Country is over for sure.
This is the most election of our lifetime. As though it is a sign of weakness to have empathy. In the Senate, well, it was late into the night, and in the Senate, you walk onto the Senate floor, and there are these big wooden ornate doors, and those ornate doors opened. And John McCain came out. He's going after me. And I'm going back after him. And that was it. And this is what the public saw. And then I step onto the floor of the well of the Senate later that day. We had votes. And I passed by John McCain. And he looks at me and he says, "Kid, come over here. You're going to make a great senator." True story. So when we think about what's at stake in this election, whoa, it's packed with some stuff. It's packed with some fundamental stuff. I say rather articulately.
I don't know if I can't. I honestly, I know I've said this before, but when I was pregnant with my first son, George W. Bush was president, and I would turn on the news. And at that time, I was still always listening to MSNBC. And I turned on the news, and I was just like, "Oh!" And Josh finally said to me, "I think you might be hurting our unborn baby by getting your so angry while you're." So I couldn't ever listen to anything Bush said. I did love Obama at the beginning. Then Trump just vile. And now we never stop being vile.
It's gone full circle. I remember when I loved Keith Olbermann.
And
now he's shredding the Green Party and just
and Rachel Maddow,
douchebag.
I know. Yeah, I am totally with you. I can't. There is not enough alcohol in the world for me. I am glad that you
Yeah.
adjusted the volume on that cackle at the end, though, because it's just too much.
But at least if we have Trump, we can laugh at all his idiocy. If we have Kamala, it's just going to be a cringe, embarrassed fest. If you're anywhere, the people that voted for her are just going to, well.
Yeah. Oh, they own it.
All right. I know we're going to end the show. I'm going to force a puppets just because somebody called for one.
Yeah, I like that.
And I feel like we need a little something happy before we go out on something uplifting, but not happy.
Okay. Oh my God. I really hope this is happy.
Hero.
Oh my God.
You have a brave puppy.
That was really cute.
All right.
That was very cute. That was totally worth it. We needed it. We
Forced
definitely
on you,
needed
sorry.
it. Okay, so we want to huge thanks to Peter Daou, Chairman Daou, for coming on, for being brave enough to face somebody who pulled no punches those years ago, which we were all super grateful for, and then also grateful for his self-awareness and reflection and incredibly, I thought, gracious transformation that he was open about, did it publicly, tons of apologies. I mean, he was like, I really admire who he is and how he has handled himself these last few years. I think is really admirable. So thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. He is the sole example who publicly changed their position towards the right position, I would argue, and we all would probably agree with. And so to attack him anymore and to question his credibility and the transformation, I think is silly. So like
people who did that are now supporting Trump and RFK Jr. So like, let's, they can all
wait a minute. You're making me force another say what? I'm going to do it. I'm doing it. I don't care what Lila says. I'm showing this one.
This is the most election of our lifetime.
She's an artist, designer, painter. I own some of her paintings. And a first-generation American living in Los Angeles. She's also the fiance of actor Jay Johnston, who was arrested over his participation in the January 6th protests at the U.S. Capitol. Welcome to the show, Sarah Radovanovich. How did I do?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for having me on.
Now, Sarah, tell us your story. Because the reason I'm bringing you on is because you paint these amazing. I don't know if it transfers over the video, but you painted a lot of. You painted a picture of Stefan, our dog that passed, which is wonderful, and it's beautiful. And you make they're really lifelike. And you've done one for Donald Trump, and that's the reason why I'm bringing you on, because you're putting it up for auction so people can bid on it, and then it helps you with your legal fees and some other things. But tell us your story.
So yeah,
I mean, come on, this guy. Look, if you don't think this guy moved right, and like he and all his cronies will say that we moved to a crazy place. We changed.
Yeah, we're just working for the establishment.
He's having somebody on who's selling a Trump painting to raise money for her husband who was
legal defense
incriminated
because
in
she was
the
mess.
January 6th stuff. And even if you knew her personally and you thought she was the greatest person in the world, I couldn't have her on my show and say, oh, well, you know,
Great
she's selling
portrait of
painting,
Trump.
guy.
Yeah.
Just so lifelike, you know,
Yeah.
buy my boner pills, you know.
Yeah.
You know he was paid for that. You know he was.
Oh,
bullshit.
God. Yeah. That's his whole deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
No integrity. It's really too bad. But anyway, to take it back to the good place. Thank you, Peter Daou. Thank you to all of you. We will see you on Wednesday. We have a lot to get to. You know, there's so much that we didn't get to today. And as much as it is sad that all these protests have not changed our leaders, we have so much respect for the people who keep putting their bodies out there on the line and waking people up and fighting for what's right. Because you don't do it necessarily because you're going to win in that moment, but you do it because you fight genocide, you fight fascism, and you do what's right every chance you get. So cheers to these people. Cheers to all of you. Keep punching up, everybody.
Absolutely. Wednesday. Cheers.